Rachel Morin is dead. Victor Martinez Hernandez is in prison, and Caroline Leavitt is under oath. She used that murder to justify a lie. She stood behind the podium, called the press despicable, and accused America of caring more about an MS-13 member than a mother bleeding out in Maryland. Now, she sat in a Senate hearing room. No podium, no teleprompter. It was 9:13 a.m., and a fine mist clung to the Capitol dome, like the sky itself wasn't sure it wanted to witness what was coming. The session was titled Oversight on Executive Messaging and Public Narrative Distortion. But everyone knew what it really meant. They were here because Caroline Leavitt couldn't stop lying. Across the oak panel table, Chris Murphy sat with the stillness of someone who'd already read the final chapter. He flipped a page in his folder, then looked up, voice calm, but unmistakably surgical. "Would you like to restate what you said during last Thursday's press briefing, Miss Caroline?" She didn't hesitate, chin lifted, smile rehearsed. "I said the media's outrage over the deportation of Abrego Garcia was despicable, and based on the way they spun it, you'd think we deported a candidate for Father of the Year." Murphy didn't flinch. He just turned to a quote already highlighted. "You also said, many in this country care more about this quote-unquote Maryland father, an illegal alien MS-13 gang member, than a Maryland mother who was brutally murdered. Was that your statement?" The smile stayed, but tension crawled into the corners of her mouth. "Yes, I was referring to Rachel Morin. Victor Martinez Hernandez, a different illegal alien, was found guilty of her murder." A pause for 3 seconds. Murphy leaned in, quietly but not gently. "So you used one murder to justify deporting someone completely unrelated?" She blinked once. "Abrego Garcia was involved in human trafficking. He's a foreign terrorist." Murphy immediately cut in. "Has he been convicted in any U.S. court?" No answer, just the sound of air beginning to shift. Murphy didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You labeled a man a terrorist with no charges, no trial, no defense. That's not law enforcement. That's political theater." Caroline's lips parted, but the senator simply raised a hand, not to silence her, just to draw the line. "You told the country we were deporting monsters, but when asked to point to one, you chose a man without a record and called it leadership." And in that moment, with the cameras fixed, the mic live, and no spin room in sight, Caroline seemed to waver a little. The hearing room held its breath. The walls hadn't moved, but something in the oxygen had shifted, tense, political, electric. Chris Murphy sat straighter now. His voice came low, precise like the sharp click of a lock turning. "Before we dive into the substance, or the vacuum, of what Caroline said last Thursday, am I the only one who thought she was struggling to read?" A ripple moved through the aides in the back row. One staffer tried not to smile. Another scribbled savage in the margin of his notepad. Caroline's lips pressed together. She was trained for this, but the set of her jaw said everything. "Let's start with how you opened that press conference. You went straight for the press, accusing them of outrage over the deportation of Abrego Garcia. Not just criticizing coverage, you called it despicable." She nodded, slow and controlled. "Because it was. They elevated a criminal, an MS-13 member, as if he were a local father. And your evidence? He was undocumented. That should speak for itself." Murphy's elbows rested loosely on the desk. "Caroline, undocumented doesn't equal criminal. You know that. You worked in comms. Words matter. You said on record that the outrage proved America cared more about Abrego than Rachel Morin, who was killed by someone else entirely." With a trace of disdain, Caroline snapped. "You think twisting facts makes you a journalist? All I see is spin." Then calmer but clipped. "That wasn't the point." "No, but it was the message." A Republican staffer shifted in his seat. From the side, a junior senator muttered under his breath, "She just Fox Newsed herself." Murphy didn't bite. He turned a page smoothly, deliberately. "Let's talk about CHMB, Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, Venezuela, the parole program." He let the words sit. The acronym needed no explanation anymore. It had gone viral on both sides of the aisle. President Biden authorized the entry of over 530,000 people fleeing violence with lawful discretion under the parole statute. Caroline didn't wait. Unlawful discretion. Abused discretion. It's a loophole being used to flood this country. Flood or filter. The word hung in the air. Murphy didn't blink. These are people escaping dictatorships. Your party calls them evil regimes. And yet, when they try to leave, you slam the door shut. And Caroline replied, because we have laws, Senator. And when President Trump tried to reverse that program with a stroke of a pen, activist judges blocked him. The phrase landed with all the subtlety of a grenade. Murphy tilted his head. Activist judges. So the problem wasn't the legality, but the result. Mr. Murphy, the problem is judicial overreach. The courts did their job. They examined the executive action, measured it against the law, and said, no, that's not activism. That's the Constitution. Caroline was still, but the pause before her next line was longer than it needed to be. We're restoring order. Murphy immediately interrupted and spoke quickly. Restoring order for whom? The room chilled. Murphy's voice never rose, but the floor seemed to shift under Caroline's seat. You say Biden abused the system, but you support bypassing individual hearings, denying due process, and issuing mass deportations through executive memo. She spoke fast. Because we can't give court dates to 500,000 people. That's impossible. Murphy couldn't stand it. So, we abandoned due process because it's inconvenient. Caroline opened her mouth. Closed it. Someone behind the witness bench exhaled, just audibly enough. A phrase snuck out. That's not law and order. That's click and deport. Murphy kept going. You use law and order like a slogan, but you treat courts like they're obstacles. The law doesn't bend for political messaging. She gripped the edge of the table, not visibly, but just enough for her knuckles to turn a shade paler. We're protecting Americans by denying hearings to desperate people running from violence. By enforcing the border, you're enforcing a brand, not a policy. The punch landed, not loud but clean. From the press gallery, someone whispered, that's the quote of the day. Caroline's eyes flicked sideways. For the first time, her gaze left Murphy. Our border is in crisis. Murphy replied immediately. Your credibility is in crisis. The room froze. Even Murphy paused after that one. Not to admire it, just to let it sit there like a verdict. He softened his tone, but not his stance. Do you know why courts keep blocking these orders? Caroline didn't answer. He closed his folder slowly, deliberately. Because they are unlawful. Because being tough isn't the same as being legal. And because justice in this country still requires more than a slogan and a pen. The tension had simply changed shape. More acidic now, more uncertain. There were no raised voices, no slamming fists, but the unease was thicker than any sound. Senator Chris Murphy adjusted his papers as if to delay the inevitable, then looked directly at Caroline. You spoke with the White House counsel's office this morning, and your words were clear. Another rogue district judge is trying to block mass deportation efforts. That's not just legal commentary. That's a coordinated accusation against the judiciary. Caroline nodded tightly, the stiffness in her shoulders betraying how much effort it took to look composed. We are fighting these injunctions in court. Yes, the previous administration turned parole into an abuse mechanism, and we're correcting it. We're restoring lawful order after years of chaos. Murphy's gaze sharpened. By removing due process for migrants. She answered immediately, as if afraid of being caught. By enforcing immigration law. Senator leaned forward, but didn't speak right away. When he did, his tone was quieter. Let's talk about someone in the middle of that enforcement, Abrego Garcia. You've said multiple times he's an MS-13 gang member, a foreign terrorist, a human trafficker, but to this day, he's never been tried in a U.S. court, not even charged. Caroline shifted, but her expression remained neutral, the kind of neutrality that screamed effort. He crossed into the country illegally. He was flagged by Homeland Security. His record has never seen a courtroom. Murphy cut in gently. We didn't try him. We just exported him. He flipped to another document. Yesterday, officials from your side of the administration told reporters that El Salvador is responsible for him. But President Blay has publicly refused to take him back. Caroline's lips pressed together, then parted with force. Blay made it clear he's not going to smuggle a foreign terrorist back into the U.S., which, I might add, seems to be exactly what many in this room want. Democrats are practically begging to re-import gang members. The accusation dropped like a stone. A murmur rolled across the chamber. One Republican aide coughed awkwardly. A Democratic senator raised his eyebrows and whispered, "She's spinning out." Murphy didn't react visibly, but his voice cooled. "Caroline, this isn't a debate about ideology. It's about responsibility. You deported a man. The receiving country refuses him. So, I'm asking, where does that leave him now?" Her answer came slower this time. He's a foreign national. His home country must take responsibility. That's international protocol. Murphy didn't blink. And yet, no one has. Not Trump, not Blay, not you. So where is he now? He's being held in Venezuela, in a facility international monitors have described as a torture site. Caroline adjusted her microphone, but didn't speak. Murphy pressed further, tone unwavering. Did Donald Trump ever personally request that Blay take Abrego Garcia back? That's a question for the former president. It is, but you're the one defending the outcome. You want the credit for being tough, but not the blame when that toughness becomes cruelty. Murphy flipped another page. His fingers moved slower now. You said this morning that you're restoring justice, but explain to me, what does justice look like when a man is detained on U.S. soil, deported without trial, and ends up in a Venezuelan cell no one will claim? He broke the law. So did Jared Kushner's real estate firm. We find them. From the back row came a whisper, just audible enough. Oof. That one hurt. Murphy's voice dropped a notch. Caroline, be honest. If Donald Trump had asked Blay to take him, he would have. But Trump didn't, because that would mean admitting a mistake. And the man can't do that. Caroline opened her mouth, then closed it. Her silence was louder than any retort. Instead, we let this play out like some dark experiment in plausible deniability. Trump blames Blay. Blay shrugs. And a human being sits in a black site no one controls. He placed both palms flat on the desk. So who owns that cell? Caroline? Whose jurisdiction is a man abandoned by two nations? She was still silent. He finished, not loudly, but with the weight of finality. What you're saying without saying it is that no one is responsible. But someone is sitting in that darkness, and that is not enforcement. That is cowardice. Caroline's eyes dropped to her notes, and for the first time since the hearing began, she didn't look back up. A legal document sat open in front of Senator Chris Murphy, but he wasn't looking at it. His focus was on Caroline, her posture, her silence, the weight she carried now that the curtain had pulled back. Let me remind you of something your boss once said. He called it a criminal abuse of power for a president to direct the Justice Department to investigate political rivals. A few heads turned toward Caroline. And yet last week, that same president signed an executive order instructing the DOJ to scrutinize Chris Krebs, a named individual, a man whose only crime was contradicting him. Caroline's eyes didn't flicker, but her fingers tightened slightly on the armrest. The president signed it. That means it's within his authority. Otherwise, he wouldn't have done it. Murphy tilted his head ever so slightly. So, it's legal because he signed it. That's the standard now. She hesitated just long enough to leave the space empty. It's his policy. It reflects the judgment of this administration. Murphy echoed, almost to himself, not the law, just judgment. Interesting. The air in the room grew heavier, not loud, not tense, just dense with awareness. He continued, flipping slowly to a transcript. Let's rewind a little. Donald Trump campaigned for months, claiming Biden had weaponized the DOJ, that using government power against political enemies was corruption. His voice hardened, not in volume, but in precision. And now he's doing exactly that. He's ordered a federal agency to target someone by name. And you stand here defending it, not as justice, but as policy. Caroline's reply came with mechanical steadiness. It's within executive scope. It's Murphy interrupted. Which version of Trump are we supposed to believe? The one who called this criminal, or the one who's now authoring the very abuse he warned about? Silence ticked forward like a slow metronome. She drew a breath deeper than needed. He's exercising his constitutional rights as president, Murphy replied. So did Nixon. The room shifted, not with movement, but with recognition. No one dared speak, but eyes met across aisles, registering the punch without the need for applause. Murphy adjusted his collar slightly, then leaned toward his mic, not as a performance, but like someone offering truth in a whisper. Chris Krebs told the American people the 2020 election was secure. He didn't incite violence. He didn't spread lies. He just told the truth. He turned toward Caroline. And for that, your boss signed a federal order putting him under investigation. Caroline's hands folded, unfolded. Her voice, when it returned, lacked the cadence of certainty. There are national concerns at stake. The president, Murphy, didn't yell. He didn't need to. Is exacting revenge. You accuse Biden of weaponizing justice, but here's Trump turning retribution into a policy memo. And your defense is a signature. Caroline reached for a document on the desk, then didn't pick it up. A few feet away, someone whispered, she's trying to find the bottom in a room without a floor. Murphy continued, unhurried. This isn't the DOJ acting on evidence. This is a president hunting for it. Backward justice. The order allows for review, not conviction. That's like calling a guillotine a haircut. A dry chuckle escaped from the press bench. Caroline didn't react. Murphy drew closer, voice now edged with clarity that didn't waver. When your party cried foul, it was overperception. Biden might be using DOJ influence, but now Trump literally signs the target and you defend it with he had the authority. Presidents are allowed to set priorities, not to settle scores. He scanned the room before delivering the line slowly, slicing it syllable by syllable. If telling the truth about the election gets you investigated, then your definition of leadership is obedience, not law. Caroline's expression didn't shift, but her shoulders pulled in, not slouched, but closing. Less control, more containment. She said at last, lower than before, this is our policy. Murphy leaned back slightly, not retreating, just recalibrating. Then your policy is projection. Every accusation you've thrown at others, you now wear as a uniform. As someone muttered behind Murphy, every accusation is a confession. We act in the interest of justice. No, you act in the interest of denial. A pause, just long enough for the press pool to jot notes, like thunderclouds scribbling lightning. You said Biden abused power. Now Trump imitates that accusation in real time. He's doing exactly what he once called a criminal. And the only difference is who signs the order. Caroline said nothing, and this time it wasn't tactical. Murphy closed his folder, then added without emphasis, but with finality, justice signed in anger is still injustice. By now, the gallery wasn't murmuring anymore. They were waiting, not for drama, but for the punch that always lands when the other side runs out of choreography. Chris Murphy didn't raise his voice. He just changed direction. Caroline, has the White House seen the AI videos coming out of China? She blinked, confused for half a breath. Excuse me? Murphy answered immediately. AI-generated videos of Trump, J.D. Vance, and Elon Musk sewing Nike shoes, assembling iPhones. Chinese state-linked accounts are circulating them. Someone in the press section laughed under their breath. They've gone viral, so I'll ask again. Has the White House seen videos? And do you have a response? Caroline adjusted the mic and replied cautiously. We are aware of the videos. Yes. While we can't verify their source or authenticity, whoever made them clearly underestimates the American workforce. The president believes in American workers and remains committed to rebuilding our supply chains. Murphy nodded slowly, a grin just barely brushing his face. So, the response to being mocked on the world stage is a vague defense of manufacturing. Caroline exhaled, then tried to pivot. What matters is that President Trump continues to fight for American industry, and later today, He'll be signing a new executive memorandum to ensure that illegal immigrants and ineligible individuals do not receive Social Security benefits. She glanced up as if bracing for applause. There was none. Murphy stayed still. Then he dropped it clean. So, after getting memed into oblivion by a foreign adversary, your boss's comeback plan is to go after Social Security. Caroline opened her mouth, but he continued before she could formulate the pivot. Let me rephrase. After being humiliated online by AI-generated satire videos that have turned Trump's advance into punchlines across global media, the reaction from this administration is to cut benefits from the most vulnerable people in this country. It's about fighting fraud. Murphy's voice sharpened. Fraud? You think giving people the benefits they've spent their lives paying into is fraud? Caroline tried to regroup. This is about protecting the system from abuse. No, Caroline, this is about shrinking the system until no one who needs it can touch it. He leaned forward, not with anger, but purpose. Let's call this what it is, a calculated attack on the very idea that the government can work for ordinary people. You want to starve the Social Security Administration until it forgets how to breathe. From the right corner of the bench came a whisper. That's not policy. That's sabotage. He opened a folder slowly, intentionally. And while we're here, your boss isn't doing this alone. He's got help from billionaires like Elon Musk who, as Senator Sanders reminded us this week, holds more wealth than the bottom 50% of American households. Let me read this quote, since it didn't seem to make the headlines your team controls. Bernie Sanders said, Mr. Musk, who owns 5 times more wealth than the bottom half of this country, is slashing the Social Security Administration, and with that, he's making it harder for the elderly and the disabled to access what they've already earned. Caroline flinched, barely, but noticeably. Murphy didn't relent. And it's not just SSA, it's the VA too. This administration is proposing to cut 83,000 jobs from the Veterans Administration. That's 83,000 fewer staff supporting the men and women who literally put their lives on the line for this country. We support veterans. You support slogans. But what veterans need are nurses, doctors, case workers, not applause lines. The silence that followed didn't feel still. It felt abandoned. Murphy's voice lowered, not for effect, but as if the weight of it spoke for itself. One man bought a presidency. Now he's selling off the safety net. He let that sentence fall like steel on granite. This isn't about budget. This is about belief. That the elderly, the poor, the disabled, the veterans don't matter. That if it doesn't benefit a billionaire, it's a waste. Caroline looked down. For the first time, she didn't even pretend to flip a page. We are cutting waste, fraud, and abuse, she mumbled. Murphy didn't raise his voice. He raised the stakes. The only fraud happening here is the idea that a man who flew into office on a private jet backed by Silicon Valley oligarchs cares about the factory worker he's now using as a meme shield. President Trump believes in the working class. He believes in the illusion of belief, and that illusion is now being exported digitally, globally, and unapologetically mocked. He closed his folder and said nothing more. The final minutes of the hearing didn't arrive with noise, but with weight, a shift. No gavel, no exhale of drama, just a new atmosphere. One signaling the theater was over and only reality remained. Chris Murphy sat still, not because he'd run out of questions, but because Caroline had run out of answers. She hadn't spoken since the last exchange. No retort, no pivot. Her notepad lay open, but the pen resting on it hadn't moved in 7 minutes. The ink had nothing left to catch. Murphy flipped a page slowly, then placed it back on the table, untouched. This isn't about a soundbite. It's about what the country hears when no one answers. She had no reaction. He didn't press her. He didn't need to. The silence itself was performing. One of the aides, too, rose back, jotted a note in his margins, underlining it twice for emphasis. Another leaned over to a colleague, whispering, "She's not just cornered. She's vanished." Caroline wasn't gone, but something in the room had already moved on without her. The camera zoomed in deliberately, needing no dramatic collapse. The stillness in her hands, the rigid catch in her breath said it all. This wasn't resistance. It was inertia. Murphy's eyes held no judgment, only cold confirmation. Finally, he spoke. For weeks, your administration has claimed it wants to restore faith in American institutions. Yet you've defended every action that chips away at them. Still no reply. He didn't rush to fill the silence. Instead, he let it stretch until it became impossible to ignore. A man sits abandoned in a prison cell no nation claims. A technocrat is targeted for simply doing his job. Social Security is being dismantled to fuel a political talking point. And your answer to all of this? Silence. Caroline's gaze stayed steady, but the stillness had lost its guise of composure. It was now an empty echo chamber, with no sound left to reverberate. This wasn't strategy, it was surrender. Near the edge of the room, maybe an intern let out the faintest exhale. Not mockery, just recognition. Murphy adjusted his notes one last time, then looked across the table again. In the end, it's not the lies that undo a government. It's when people stop answering the questions. He rose, not in triumph, not in anger, but with quiet finality. Opposite him, Caroline remained seated, unmoving, not out of defiance, but because it no longer mattered if she moved at all. The room didn't applaud. It didn't jeer. It simply absorbed the moment, as if knowing something had ended here. Not with a headline, not with a bang, but with the quiet certainty of a voice choosing silence. And the country heard that silence louder than any word. No official verdict was handed down. No gavel struck to name a victor. Yet the conclusion hung over Washington like fog lingering after a storm. Not loud, but everywhere. Chris Murphy didn't step in front of cameras after the hearing. No gloating. No tweets. His silence wasn't retreat, it was a statement. He'd said what needed saying. The rest, the country could witness for itself. The next morning, headlines made the noise he chose not to. The Hill collapses at the Capitol. Trump's box freezes on the national stage. Axios memed, mocked, and muted. Caroline Leavitt's worst day yet. Politico, from policy to parody, how a press secretary fell apart live. Clips from the hearing flooded TikTok and X. Caroline's blank stare became a viral format. The silence she wrapped herself in morphed into captions like, when your talking points run out mid-sentence, this meeting could have been an email. InsertLogic.exe not found. The real-world consequences followed fast. A Sunday Fox News panel replaced Caroline's scheduled appearance with a generic placeholder. Trump campaign declined to send a spokesperson. Her name quietly vanished from the rollout lineup of an upcoming rally in Ohio. One GOP strategist close to the campaign told Vanity Fair. Off record, she walked in as the message. She walked out as the cautionary tale. Inside the MAGA war room, no one blamed her publicly. But internally, shifts are being made. Messaging responsibilities were redistributed. Briefing access tightened. And Caroline's once rising star flickered to static. Progressives seized the moment. AOC posted a one-liner. When your strategy is silence, don't be surprised when silence defines you. Meanwhile, conservative media split into two predictable lanes. Fox went quiet. Newsmax called it media entrapment. Steve Bannon, however, snapped. They sent a press secretary to fight a prosecutor. That was never going to end well. As the dust settled, the bigger picture came into focus. The hearing wasn't just about Chris Murphy versus Caroline Leavitt. It wasn't just about Trump's hypocrisy, Musk's money, or Social Security's future. It was about what happens when spin crashes headlong into a wall of facts. It was about what unfolds when rhetoric runs out of runway, faltering mid-flight. Above all, it was about what America truly hears when those in power fall silent. Because in politics, nothing resonates louder than a mic left unanswered.